Hey guys, how's it going? Tcgplayer TCG here. Just wanted to go over a topic today with you all that I thought would be pretty fun to discuss, and it is defensive cards in the current state of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because things are a little different now than they were previously, and I have a bunch of examples here of different various cards that are pretty good right now. Pretty good and pretty not so good. So the reason this came up was because I actually had a recent epiphany in that my Zodiac Pure deck was failing because it did not address the changes in the current climate of the game, where cards like board wipes were actually being phased out. So cards like these were actually being phased out in favor, and so were like hand traps and things like that, in favor of more classic defensive cards. And I found that to be very interesting. And I wanted to discuss that with you all today and kind of explain why that is. Because I feel like a lot of less experienced players or up-and-coming players may not necessarily understand why certain things get shifted around, and it might not seem the most intuitive at first. And so, not to try to make myself sound like I'm some, amazing player or anything like that. I have a lot of time playing, and I wanted to bring some of that experience to you guys with a video like this. Previously I had spoken about card roles in Yu-Gi-Oh! And kind of how to identify your cards. And one thing that came up a lot is that a lot of players struggle with defensive cards and how to best put them in their role and how to best utilize them within the role and even within a game itself. And so I wanted to go over a lot of defensive cards and like field wipes and things like that, and kind of explain why they may or may not shine. So let's start with what I felt like going into this format was going to be very good, which was the proactive field wipe spell cards. I didn't grab it, but I'll include these in there as well, because these will go with the theme there. There's supposed to be Kaiju Slumber here, which were like Harpy's Feather Duster, Raigekis, Dark Holes, the Kaijus, Kaiju Slumber, even cards like Dark Ruler No More. Things like that were I viewed to be very strong going into the format. And the reason for this was because I had felt that the Virtual World deck, yes, setting up a Calamities is strong, or the Drytron setting up, a Herald is strong, but you have all of these cards that let you break those setups and things like that, and they're also just very good in general. Like, there is no matchup currently where a Dark Hole or a Raigeki is just utterly useless. There isn't a singular matchup that doesn't utilize monster cards. Harpy's Feather Duster is a bit more arguable. These cards tend to always be useful. Harpy's Feather Duster is a bit more format dependent, but still very useful overall. The problem with these cards, though, is that they are only good at specific points within the field being set up. So, for example, Raigeki and Harpy's Feather Duster, or Raigeki and Dark Hole, are only good if, or depending on the deck you play against, if the monsters can be destroyed. So if you're playing against a deck like the Shaddoll Eldritch deck, well, then it doesn't really matter that you have a Raigeki or a Dark Hole. Their window can be destroyed and you're still floodgated. If you're playing against a deck that, if you're playing against like Invoked, these can struggle because they tend to keep a spell in hand to negate things like that. Conversely, these cards tend to shine in those instances where these may not. These are all able to stop Red as Dark Dragoon and the Herald, but interestingly enough, these four, the Kaijus, fall to the Vanities Ruler that is now very popular in Drytron. And so now you have a card that is just atrocious to draw versus Drytron. These are arguably okay against Drytron, but again, they can be negated by Herald of Ultimateness. And then you've got Dark Ruler No More, and I just don't have them, but Forbidden Droplets would fall into that same category of a card that can allow you to just play. So these are very arguable, and these have actually already started to fall out of favor. The other big category of cards that have actually fallen out of favor are the hand traps. And the reason for this is, in a similar way, they're actually only really useful at certain parts of the combo. So Ash Blossom I have intentionally decided to forego, because Ash Blossom is good against every single deck. It is just an average card overall. Arguably, this is probably the best format Ash Blossom has had almost since release. The card has been very underwhelming quite a bit since its release. So right now is actually, weirdly enough, like the time it shines the most. But a lot of hand traps are what people tend to go to when they think of like defensive cards. Like they don't think of like, field wipes or actual classic trap cards. They think hand traps, because hand traps can serve multiple purposes. They can serve roles as defensive cards, as extenders, and they're also just actual bodies. And they can be tutors, they can be level 1s for link plays, they can be just big lights, they can do all sorts of crazy things. And right now, I would say these are probably the best defensive cards outside of Ash Blossom. But most of these tend to be very average at best. And that is in a best case scenario. So let's go through these one by one, and we'll kind of explain. So Nibiru is very underwhelming. It is awful against Eldritch. It is awful against Zodiac, unless they are playing in a way that you should probably be winning anyway, because they're misplaying heavily. And just playing into Nibiru, or your hand is just so crazy that they're forced to do it. However, overall, the card is very weak. It is okay against Drytron. However, they are able to keep extending past it, and typically they'll have a follow-up play to play around it, or they'll have their Herald of Orange Light to stop it anyway. Gamma is good against everything. I mean, it's just, Gamma is similar to Ash Blossom, pretty much as good against everything. The problem that Gamma has right now is that it's typically only good going second, and games are going longer, so drawing those dead copies of Gamma is actually a threat. And so Gamma may not necessarily always be the best choice. Bell is arguably the second strongest hand trap next to Ash Blossom right now, because it can effectively act as a 4th, 5th, and 6th copy of Ash Blossom in most matchups. My Remote Duel Extravaganza Zodiac deck, for example, I played Bell, Skullmeister, DD Crow, and Ash Blossom. And Bell was the hand trap I was the most impressed with. It overperformed greatly because it allowed you to hit Eld Elixirs, it allowed you to hit Preparation of Rites, Pre-Preparation of Rites, the Drytrons from Grave, things like that. The issue that Bell has, again, is that it is only able to stop them the one time, and it is a horrendous card to draw after the fact. And so that is where Bell tends to be a little weaker. Lancia is an interesting hand trap in that it is... I lump this and Droll and Lockbird into the same category of floodgate hand traps. And what I mean by that is they're cards that put a lingering effect in the game that you need to then apply proper play around or respecting. Lancia is extremely powerful in the Dinosaur matchup as well as the Virtual World matchup. However, it tends to falter outside of that, and cards like Lancia and Droll and Lockbird actually have the same issue in that they are very powerful cards. However, your deck needs to be able to do something so powerful that you either win the game or effectively win the game on the following turn. For example, if you Droll and Lockbird and you then just pass turn, you've done nothing. Your Droll and Lockbird has done absolutely nothing, and it is worthless. If you instead are playing, say, Virtual World, and you Droll and Lockbird the opponent, and then you follow up with your full combo and you Calamities them with a Chuche, well, now that Droll and Lockbird has gotten you there, and that's all you needed, and all of their follow-up will do nothing. So these kinds of cards I I view as very powerful, but similar to most actual floodgates, I personally feel that they tend to be very incorrect to play, in that you must have a powerful follow-up card to go with it. One card that I don't actually just physically have right now is Allied Justice Cycle Reader, that goes in tandem with DD Crow. I feel DD Crow and cards like Cycle Reader are very good. Specifically in the Drytron matchup, Crow tends to shine overall kind of against everything right now. Actually, it's really weird. But those are just high impact cards, and that's kind of what you need your hand traps to be, is very high impact. So like Gamma is a high impact hand trap. Nibiru tends to be high impact. However, right now none of the decks really let you resolve your Nibiru, so it has no impact. DD Crow has historically been a very average impact card. However, currently you can just win games with it if you time it just right and your hand allows you to do enough. So it's kind of like in a weird position right now. The reason why these cards tend to have fallen out of favor, though, is because unlike the previous format where we had Dragon Link and Infernoble and Virtual World, it was just full of combo decks and stuff like that. The game has slowed down now because even the combo decks, like the Drytron deck can grind, the Virtual World deck can potentially grind, things like that. They're all able to go slower, and so now we've actually hit the point where actual trap cards, and I'm putting Mistaken Arrest here as a trap card on purpose, are very good. And so the reason for this is because these are all able to be drawn both before and after, with very few caveats, before and after the setup has happened, and are able to be used. So I'll go through these. For example, I'll go through my personal favorite right now. My two personal favorites are Solemn Strike and Paleozoic Dynamiscus. So Dynamiscus is a trap card that, for those who don't know, you target a face-up card in the field, and then at resolution you discard a card and banish the card. And then it has the Paleozoic clause of, if you activate a trap card, or if a trap card is activated, you can special summon this from the graveyard. What's really cool, though, is that Dynamiscus serves multiple functions. It is a defensive card. It is a reactive extender. It allows you to break apart setups. It allows you to prevent setups. And it can even set up your graveyard by putting cards in there. It serves quite a few different functions, which I really enjoy seeing in one card. So this is definitely, like, I would say, probably becoming like the premier trap card right now. And this is I don't even know why I put quotations there. This is becoming, I would argue, probably the best trap card right now. Solemn Strike is in a similar boat. And again, I don't have Ice Dragon's Prisons, otherwise I put those in there as well. Ice Dragon's Prison falls into the same category as Dynamiscus, and that they're the two premier trap cards right now besides Solemn Strike. Solemn Strike allows you to break setups. It allows you to, you can't destroy the Dragoon, but you can force through an effect by negating the effect of the Dragoon. So you can, let's say you activated some key spell or starter card so that we'd be able to start to answer the Dragoon, and they negate it, then you can just flip this, negate the Dragoon effect, and then you'll be able to continue playing. They've activated their Dragoon, and now you're able to keep playing. Really quick, though, back to Dynamiscus. One very interesting thing is that with Ice Dragon's Prison being in the format, that makes Dynamiscus better in that if they play around, like, let's say they play around Ice Dragon's Prison when they're playing Eldritch, for example, and they go to summon their Golden Lord, and you choose not to stop the Sanguine, and they Sanguine back their Golden Lord to play around Ice Dragon's Prison, so that way they don't have a Golden Lord on field and a Golden Lord in grave, and then they would have them both banished and they would lose. That comes up actually quite a bit, and that's a very conscious decision that you need to make when you're playing these decks. Well, by doing that, they actually play into the Dynamiscus, because then you can just Dynamiscus the one Golden Lord, and they've been cut off access for the other one for at least 2 turns. And if they choose to play around the Dynamiscus, then they can lose to Ice Dragon's Prison. It's an interesting dichotomy there. But the entire Eldritch engine is actually a prime example of why trap cards are so good, in that they facilitate multiple roles, they are spot removal, they are banishing, they can be attack stat reduction, they can be defensive cards, they can be damage, they can do everything that they need to do. And this is kind of where we've gotten it in similar ways to True Draco, actually. The Eldritch cards have to be so overtuned to make actual trap cards worth playing. So that's another thing to consider, is that Eldritch cards themselves just make trap cards better by existing, because by these existing, they make cards like Calamities worse, and then you need to be able to answer trap cards, and you don't want to necessarily just throw monsters at their trap cards, because these trap cards are also monsters that are also able to then get more cards. So you would run out of cards first, so you need to be able to answer theirs with yours. Another type of card I've really been enjoying are this could go into the category of the, similar to Lancia and Droll, are the Floodgate Chainables. I should have a different Dimension Ground here, and I just didn't think to grab it. But Mistaken Rest is a prime example of a card that I feel is very powerful right now. Obviously, being able to shut them down from searching is great, but what I mean is, this doesn't lose to Lightning Storm, this doesn't lose to Harpy's Feather Dust or a Cosmic Cyclone. You actually want them to hit that card with it. Same with Dimensional Barrier. You want these cards to be hit with their back row removal, because then you get free cards for an effect that you were already going to be using anyway. That's just great card economy, because then it takes a -1 card like a Dimensional Barrier and turns it into a 0 or even a +1 if they used a Twin Twister and they only hit this. Or you can just use, or if they activate Mistaken, or if they activate, say, if we're living like the dream, they activate a Signet Mining, for example, and they discard a card. Well, then you activate Mistaken Rest, and now your Mistaken Rest is a +1, and they're locked out of searching. Things like that are very good. So these cards definitely right now are starting to shine. Another interesting type of trap card are the board wipe trap cards, actually, that have the field wipe trap cards that have started to spring up again. And I personally am playing all of these, except I think I'm not playing Needle Sealing right now, but I have been. I have been playing all of these in some form or another very recently. Torrential Tribute, as everybody knows, is very powerful. Just being able to, if your opponent goes and sets up their field, you can draw this Torrential Tribute and be totally fine, because if you can put them in a position where they feel that another summon is correct, or they don't necessarily make the read that a Torrential Tribute can be played, they will just walk into it, and then they can just lose the game outright because they walked into a Torrential Tribute. That happens quite often. Or I actually just had a game in a tournament the other day where Storming Mirror Force came up, and I had forced my opponent to have to summon another monster from the extra deck to utilize more resources, and then my Storming Mirror Force just cleared everything, and I was able to grind out from there. Needle Sealing, in a similar way to Torrential Tribute, is fantastic in that sense. Really cool, though, with these two specifically, and even Torrential Tribute, is Trap Trick. So Trap Trick allows you to effectively play additional copies of each of these, but more than that, what I've personally found that I enjoy with Trap Trick is that it puts the knowledge of the card that they then have to respect in their head. So if I Trap Trick out a Torrential Tribute, you now know you have to either play correctly through the Torrential Tribute, or you have to then just pass and see when you can get to your removal. And it just puts them on what's called Better Habit, and they're forced into a position where they either have to be able to answer that exact trap card, or they're stuck in a position where you will eventually be able to play. The final type of trap cards that I want to talk about are, there's two, is cards like Crackdown, I feel are very powerful right now. One really cool thing is, so if you're playing like Zoodiac Eldritch, I highly recommend you play Crackdown. Because if you play against Zoodiac or the Zoodiac Eldritch Mirror match and you just take their Trident or whatever zoo they make, you can just win the game off of that. Crackdown is just such a high value card. It's also very cool in that Crackdown makes the Drytron matchup universally better if you are able to force out a negate, or if you are able to force out the Herald effect in a way that allows you to resolve Crackdown if they have Vanity's Ruler, because then you can just take their Vanity's Ruler, and then they just don't have an out to Vanity's Ruler. at all, and that's actually come up a few times. But it's also really cool because it is similarly to some of the other defensive cards we've mentioned. Is it can just it puts them in a position that it's very awkward, because you can just take their starter cards, you can take some of their extenders, and now they're forced to make these awkward fields that are subpar, things like that. And then trap cards, the final kind, there's impermanence, which I didn't really know how to categorize this. I was going to put this with the hand traps, but I also view it, but it's an actual trap card. I would actually just avoid playing impermanence at all right now. The card's pretty awful, because everything activates and resolves in the hand at this point, or in the graveyard, or you just don't care. And so there's that. And then Solemn Judgment is just what I like to call just like an insurance policy trap. You play it just to always make sure that your field stays alive. You can play these or Starlight Roads, things like that. You basically play these to stop the opponent from re-raising their ceiling. This is a defensive card that helps your floodgates. The last thing to mention is when it came to cards like Lightning Storm and Evenly Matched, I actually am a very large advocate that those cards are very incorrect to play, especially Evenly Matched. The reason why is because we are in a tempo-based game right now. It's not just like a blowout and then that's it. You are in a position where you're grinding out games, and so a field wipe might, if you open up like just an insane hand with a field wipe and then a Lulu and a Nan Nan and all these other things, great, that's awesome. However, typically, you'll open up with a card like Lightning Storm or Evenly Matched. Your opponent probably won't die, and then they'll get to play again, and eventually, if they're able to play and they play correctly, they can still grind out games. And so I've never been a fan of cards like that. And Evenly Matched, especially, I think, is an example of a card that is kind of a trap. Not in the sense of a trap card, but it's a trap in that it seems like it would be very good, and it almost never is. Because you have to think that in order for your Evenly Matched to be truly useful, you have to go second. You then have to draw the Evenly Matched, which only happens in 40% of your games, because most of the time you'll need to open with it. Then your opponent has to do their combo uninterrupted without establishing multiple waves of interruption, and then your Evenly Matched has to be activated and resolve, and then the rest of your hand has to be able to either answer whatever singular card they left on the field, or be so powerful that they will not be able to recover, which, given the state of the game, is very unlikely. And so cards like that, I feel, are almost universally incorrect. Anyway, sorry for rambling, guys. I just wanted to do this one take video really quick. Just wanted to go over some of these ideas with you really quick here for any sort of remote duels. I know there's the remote duel invitational qualifier sectional championship coming up. Hopefully you all get to participate in yours if you've gotten your invite, and if you are in Group B, you will get to see me. Good luck to everybody out there, and I hope you have a fantastic day.